Good morning and welcome to our fifth dialogue on a series out of six in a series that we're calling the Vision 2030 series. This dialogue series is being hosted by Zimbabwe Institute. My name is Belinda Chaura. I'm going to be facilitating today's dialogue. Today's dialogue is agriculture and mining to achieve Vision 2030. Like I said, this is the fifth one. We've been running this since the end of September. And the last dialogue is going to be on the 1st of December, which is in about 2 weeks. So today, like I said, we are discussing agriculture and mining to achieve Vision 2030. All our speakers are going to be either discussing agriculture or mining and trying to unpack how these two sectors, mega sectors as I call them, how these two mega sectors can promote Zimbabwe's achievement of an upper middle income society. So we are on Facebook. You can also find us on other social media platforms like Twitter and LinkedIn. In all of these platforms, we are working with the hashtags towards an inclusive society, catalyzing Vision 2030, and then hashtag ZimVision 2030. And of course, hashtag Vision 2030 alone. The reason why we are hosting these dialogues, three main reasons. The first one, obviously, we want to create a consensus on what it will take to achieve an upper middle income economy. People have different reasons, people have different ideas about how that can happen for various reasons. Here we want to come up with what a consensus, citizen-based consensus on what it's going to take to achieve Vision 2030. And the reason we're doing this obviously is because Vision 2030 affects us as individuals. It's not just a government initiative, but it will affect me, it will affect my children, it will affect everybody who is a Zimbabwean. The second reason, we want to create a culture of collaboration, co-production amongst the different stakeholders who can be involved in the achievement of Vision 2030. And of course, we want to then agree on a process of accountability between state and non-state actors. How can accountability be fostered between these actors so that Vision 2030 is achieved? So today, I'm going to call up as our first speaker, Dr. Tawanda Namusi, who is going to frame for us the Vision 2030 discussion. Dr. Namusi, I think maybe the question that I'd have for you is to kind of start us off. Between these two sectors, or looking at these two sectors, what is, would you say broadly, is their role to the Zimbabwean economy? And is it wise for us to be focusing on them as key sectors to achieve Vision 2030? Of course, I know it's a basic question, but you'll unpack it for us. And of course, Tawanda Namusi is the Executive Director of Zimbabwe Institute. And he is really the original host of this Vision 2030 series. So Dr. Namusi, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Belinda. Good morning, colleagues, friends who've been with us from day one. And for those of you who are joining us for the very first time today, you are welcome. And thank you for making the time. These discussions have grown in momentum and in size since the day we started. At some point, we were hosting over 250, 280 on our Zoom platform. But the excitement goes beyond just the Zoom. Also, people are following live on Facebook, on our Facebook feed, Zimbabwe Institute, and also on our friends, HSTV. So I think just before I go into the discussion, it's very important for us to restate why we are having these conversations. In 2018, government of Zimbabwe came up with a vision to build Zimbabwe into an upper middle income economy by year 2030. That was done and it was celebrated perhaps in government circles and other multilaterals. But there was very little discussion that was taking place in the country around actually how we were going to, as citizens, as stakeholders in this, were going to contribute towards it. So we saw a gap in the sense that here's a vision statement, here are vision documents, starting with the Transitional Stabilization Program, the NDS1, which we are in the middle of, that government is implementing. But we are not engaging with the ultimate objective being this thing about an upper middle income economy. So we came together with some of our partners, and we said, we need to broaden participation and discussion, because we realize that any public policy or any public vision requires a consensus. You cannot, for those of you who are in families, you cannot just come up with a vision by yourself, either as a father or as a mother, but you have to agree as a family. So we said, as the family of Zimbabweans, we have not yet had a robust, inclusive discussion around this. And from day one, when we did this, our focus was on broadening participation and broadening the conversation. So in many instances, you'll find that we are deliberate, that we are not inviting government people to come and talk. Because for us, we're inviting government people every week. We invite stakeholders from government to come and listen. We're not putting them on the program to talk, but we want them to be a listening government. That's what the president promised us when he was campaigning. He said, you'll be a listening president. So for us, we take him literally on his word. So we invite his officers to come and be in these meetings to listen to what citizens, experts, scholars, and even friends of Zimbabwe who are speaking from outside Zimbabwe, but with a Zimbabwean interest, are saying concerning Vision 2030. We believe we've been partly successful in making sure that we create this platform. So going forward, the first thing that we did, which we felt was like we had to do it, given where we sit in the spectrum of institutions in Zimbabwe. As an organization, our mission statement is a quest for an inclusive society. That's our quest. You know, we exist so that we can contribute towards the establishment of an inclusive society. So when it comes to Vision 2030, the first thing that we did, we said, guys, we cannot just talk about an upper middle income economy, because we can achieve an upper middle income economy if we use the traditional measurements of GDP, etc. But ours has to be an inclusive upper middle income economy. So we've thrown in that term, and we're using it to say, that's why you find one of the hashtags that we're using for this discussion is an inclusive society. For us, we want an upper, we're just not talking about Vision 2030 to say, oh, by GDP, we should be here, whatever, but we're really talking about equitable growth, inclusion, etc. So even our journey so far, we're focused on number one, the journey itself of making sure that citizens are involved, or rather they are at the center of this discussion. So that was one of the first discussions where we brought a broad spectrum of representatives from certain, from membership or from different demographic groups and social groups. So we had representatives from the youth, we had representatives from the church, etc. Because our quest at that moment was to say, how do we make sure that the visioning process itself is inclusive? Then we began to talk about Zimbabwe's isolation. That was the second discussion, to say, if you're to achieve this Vision 2030, noble as it is, you cannot achieve it in isolation. There are many methods that have been used to ensure or to enhance Zimbabwe's isolation from global circuits, either global circuits of financial savings, services, or global circuits of production, global circuits even of knowledge production. So in many instances, you see Zimbabwe missing on certain platforms. So we said, how does Zimbabwe re-engage? Because we think it's one of the most crucial steps at the initial stages of realizing Vision 2030, making sure that Zimbabwe can re-engage with the international economy and re-engaging on the basis of the aspirations of the people of Zimbabwe. And that was number two. Then number three, we went on to talk about, I think it was the discussion on the economy, where we're looking at, say, what are the key drivers, what needs to be done around the economy, etc. Then we discussed social policy, which was the previous discussion. Then today we are discussing these two. And I want to try to answer Belinda's question by saying that every country in the world has what we call a unique endowment. And when you try to look for Zimbabwe's unique endowment, natural and otherwise, it mostly has to do with your mining resource base. And also your agriculture, the climate and the land, etc. The experts will tell you that Zimbabwe is good for many agricultural activities. And we have a diverse set of minerals compared to even our neighbors. The diversity of the minerals that we have in this country makes it very imperative for us to say, when we're talking about an inclusive upper middle income economy, we are asking ourselves, how will mining given the diverse mining mineral base that we have, how will mining contribute towards the achievement of Vision 2030, and how does agriculture also contribute to that? So in doing that, as we position agriculture and mining as potential game changers, because they are by far the biggest contributors to GDP, they are the biggest employers by share of labor and by sector, they're the biggest employers, and they are also potential game changers in terms of the revenues that they can generate. At the Ministry of Mines and as government as vision, they've already started talking about a $12 billion mining economy, telling you of how big this mining resource is. And I think agriculture is also soon going to be putting a price tag on its production capacity. So, but before we do that, we need to understand where we are in terms of agriculture and mining, in terms of the best. So the question that I'm asking and will be answered by others is what has changed in mining and in agriculture. Starting off with agriculture, maybe, I think if you're looking at Zimbabwe, the moment you talk of agriculture, you cannot do that discussion in the absence of a discussion of the changes that have happened to land ownership and the sort of the radical restructuring of the agrarian structure, where previously it was dominated by large-scale commercial farming sector, but now we actually have a mixture in terms of our agriculture. Is a mixture because we've predominantly with what we may call smallholder, but in other countries 6 hectares are not smallholders, but here we call that part of the smallholder. And also we've got the medium scale and the large scale and we've got estates. So that has changed. The agrarian structure has changed significantly. And also there's recovery of production across many value chains. If you look at what is happening in our wheat, looking at tobacco, looking at maize, looking at cotton, and even soybean. So there's that sort of kind of recovery, but also there's the intervening, the problem, I think the post-2000 problem of climate change and us having to come up with climate smart responses to agriculture. So the intervention of Mvudza, which has been piloted in the past year and we are running with it again this year, is also another attempt at sort of ensuring recovery in agriculture. So I would say those are the broad issues. And there are certain outstanding issues in agriculture, issues to do with land tenure, the global compensation agreement. Those have to be resolved if we're really going to sort of unpack and unleash this agricultural base. And in mining, what has changed? Very little has changed. There's still a limited set of players in mining. There's actually been an undoing of what some of the changes that have been done during the previous regime around, number one, creating a possibility of a social license for mining through community share ownership trust, where we're beginning to see mining resources being shared, or some of the mining resources being shared with the communities that lie contiguous to the mining assets. But that sort of is in the process of being undone. And we're not yet seeing a very strong conversation or public discourse around the need for local content in mining. We talk a lot about value chains, sort of value addition, but we don't talk about local content in the production sort of systems, in the ways in which mining secures resources, inputs into its production from local players, so that mining can play a role in dynamizing different agriculture, industrial value chains and even agricultural value chains. So we're to see mining being sort of integrated within the broader economy. We don't want to say this, but we still find mining locked up in what Guy Monet called an enclave-like form of development, where if you go to a mining complex, you are literally in a first world. I come from Shurugwi. So when I go to my village, I have to turn at the gate where Unki Platinum is. All the way to Unki is a tarred, wonderful road. But as I go to my village, I'm now going on an untarred road, etc. The infrastructure has not changed. So you have different worlds, 2 different worlds, literally. One first world like, and another one third or fourth world, just separated by a road. So mining remains very enclave-like. I'm talking here about big mining firms which dominate platinum, gold, and diamonds and other minerals. But we've seen also a growth, and this is to be celebrated, a growth in artisanal mining, small-scale mining, etc. So these are the broad changes that we are seeing. What needs to be done? Like I said, we need to resolve land tenure in agriculture. Then we need to make sure that there's improved participation of the market players, especially financial services in agriculture. There's very limited funding, because at the moment, the majority of the funding is coming from government. It's highly unsustainable. It's not helping us because it keeps on creating a deficit on the part of government. So we need to look at how can private sector be brought into agriculture. And I hope the minds that we've brought in here are going to be helping us unpack how this can be done. So there was also in agriculture, and I hope this is going to happen, was I made sure that one of the senior academics or prac academics that I respect is part of these conversations. She's not only an expert on land, but she's also involved in farming. So we want to understand the participation, gender-based participation in agriculture, women and the youth, etc., and what are the opportunities therein, and what are the challenges that they face? Because for us to achieve Vision 2030, like I said, it has to be inclusive. We cannot leave anyone behind. And for long, we always recognize that agriculture was highly feminized, but we did not have sufficient interventions to ensure that they participate fully in the value chains in agriculture and even also in mining. And also there's an emerging global discourse that we have to connect with. This discourse around making sure that there's local content in mining and also the social licenses for mining companies, the extent to which mining companies are part and parcel of the communities in which they are mining from, and they're engaged, seized with the development challenges of those mining communities, not as a handout, but also involved. And that way we are provoked to look for models elsewhere. We tried to get colleagues from the Newmont Foundation, a foundation that was set up by a mining company in Ghana, so that we can talk about the relationship between philanthropy and mining, or community work and mining. But we didn't manage to do that. But it's a model worth looking at. So I think, without trying to just sound like we can compress this discussion to my opening remarks, I think this is one of the most crucial discussions that we are having around Vision 2030, because our belief is based on our belief is that if we resolve challenges in our agricultural value chains, especially by broadening the set of actors that are engaged in agriculture and also in mining, we have a huge potential to achieve some of the goals to do with Vision 2030, especially the inclusive part beyond just ensuring GDP growth. So I think it's going to be a very exciting discussion. We also have our colleagues from Legatam Foundation who will come back and look at the the statistics and the global picture of how agriculture and mining are contributing to the development of other economies. Thanks again for coming and for setting aside these 2 hours of discussions. If we go over, it's because the discussion is so exciting and we can't stop. But we are really hoping that we come up again. We are hoping to come up with a policy brief of sorts from this conversation that we will use to begin to influence processes going forward. Thank you so much, Belinda.
All right, brilliant. Thank you so much, Dr. Marisa. So first up, to go into the discussion, I'd like to invite to the academic that Dr. Marisa referred to, who is Dr. Ndakaripa Hungwe. She's an agriculture and rural development specialist. And of course, the area of specialization is economic and social development, as well as agronomy and agricultural economics. Dr. Hungwe, I'll invite you to unmute your mic so we can really talk about, right now, we'll focus mainly on agriculture. And the work that you've done in agriculture obviously would be able to kind of frame today's discussion on that topic. So from your perspective, what would you say the state of agriculture is today, and how can it be made more inclusive, as Dr. Marisa referred to specific groups such as women and youth? Please talk to us about that.
Thank you so much, Belinda. Thank you, Dr. Marisa. Dr. Marisa has already said a lot of the things that I would have loved to say. So it's good because that provides us with a basis upon what to discuss. So when we are discussing NDS-1, the way I situate NDS-1, I don't want to remove it from the Agenda 2030, the UN Agenda 2030 of the 17 SDGs. Because they're just as important, because NDS-1 is supposed to feed into the Agenda 2030. Not only that, it's supposed to feed into the 2063 African Union Agenda. So when we are discussing NDS-1, NDS-2, all of them are supposed to feed into the broader national, continental, regional, and also international frameworks. So as I look at it, the same mantra which Dr. Marisa said, where we don't want to leave anyone behind, that's the idea behind it. And when we say we don't want to leave anyone behind in agriculture is on the food insecurity that had been existing in our country for some time. And the NDS-1 is actually open about it, that they want to reduce the food insecurity, where usually at its peak, it's above 59%, and what they would want to reduce it is in 2025 to about 10% of food insecurity. It's also another way of acknowledging that there are certain people who get and others don't get. No matter how many policies you are structuring, no matter how much production is happening in a country, you have to accept that there are some who are left behind. That's why I situated the Agenda 2030 with the UN SDG, where you don't want to leave anyone behind. So the pillars behind it on the NDS one are food and nutrition security, and that's clear. It's a country where our food production had gone down for some years. Dr. Murisa has talked about the land reform, how it affected production, how our mostly staple crops suffered, and also our export crops suffered as a result. But they have jumped on since then. Maybe I can discuss a little bit, just quickly, the statistics of how they have kind of transformed. I couldn't put in the presentation, so I just said. So, okay, maize, for example, the last season, the sector, the production has gone up by 199%. The small grains have gone up by about 130%. Sugar beans have gone up by 140%. So it's, just for the food and nutrition security kind of issues, production has really gone up significantly. And maize, you must remember that it had gone down to about 470,000. In 2008, production was 270,000 tons, as compared to now, where we have gone up to about 2,717,000. And the traditional grains, they'd also gone down, despite traditional grains being mostly grown by the smallholder sector. But you know what affects that is processing and marketing. So if you don't add processing and marketing and value addition into the equation of how do we develop ourselves into the 2030 agenda of being an upper middle income country, we need to look into that, because most of our population actually live in low rainfall areas. Soybean production has always been a problem since 2000. We have, I think, went down to something like 47,000 tons. And the hope is, how do we get soybean out of the rut that it is in? And that's one of the big challenges. Why soybean? Because that's where most of our cooking oil comes from. Cooking oil is one of our major imports into the country. And also soybean provides us with the necessary stock feed, for the stock feed industry, and also for people who want to change their diets from the normal diets they've had. So there are other issues that the government has been able to do, where they've brought in other players, the private sector through CPZ program and the Agricultural Finance Corporation. The money is expensive. I'm now speaking as a farmer. When you want to get production moving, when you want to get to the numbers that you're talking about, you need to improve on financing. Financing is as high as 47%. You can't, it's not sustainable in an economy like ours. You need to actually make sure that financing is reasonable so that farmers can then invest in more production and also increase their productivity. The reason why farmers' productivity has been low is because they don't use as much fertilizer as they should be doing on their cropping programming. And also because if they're not feeding their cattle enough, the offtake is low in the livestock sector. So all these have a kind of, the value chains all mix and mingle throughout. So if you don't get it right from the financing part, you don't get it right because a person doesn't get access to the inputs that they're supposed to buy. So we want women and youth to be involved in farming. They can't afford farming. It's expensive. How do you make it? Because farming is not about being given a bag. It's about more than that. And we want commercial farmers and less subsistence farmers. So those are the kind of crop that we want to grow as a country. Crop of farmers, I mean. And then the issue to do with expensive farming. CPZ has taken up most of the major kind of private sector funding in agriculture. It's not cheap. It's actually a very expensive programming where CBZ is almost acting as if it's a commodity broker. You know, it's actually in commodity broking. They're buying all the inputs. Then when you get them as a farmer, get is in quotes. When you receive those inputs, they are 40% higher than what you could have bought it if you had been given financing yourself and looked for it on the market. So it distorts marketing issues when you do that. I'll give an example. Fertilizer today, using our local currency, is about $5,500 for a 50 kg bag. Last year, the same fertilizer was $3,875. You cannot sustain, because when farmers sell their produce, they're selling their produce and getting their money in local currency. So we cannot use the US dollar value of saying when you bought it, it was X US dollars. It doesn't work in farming when you are talking reality. Then the issue of seed, for example, seed packaging. Seed companies have become smart, almost like what chocolate companies used to do. Chocolate companies would buy a bar of chocolate and it costs you 25 cents. So what they realized, if they raise prices, people stop buying chocolate, they just change the pricing, change the packaging. The same chocolate for 25 cents, but you're getting less chocolate. The same thing with seed companies in this country. What they are doing is, last year, the package was 25 kg for a package of maize where you want to buy, pegged maize. This has been reduced to 18 kg. So you're buying the same, but being told, oh, now the kernels are 50,000. But 50,000 kernels last year, or in fact, you have lost a reduction, because 50,000 kernels will equal you 18 kgs for the price that you will have paid last year for 25 kg. So we have just been had, or just like what kids go through, the same thing we've just gone through is, and also the pricing. This same seed was 8,500 last year, and this year is 17,170. When you want to be a productive farmer, you need to increase your plant population. When you want to increase your plant population, you need to buy more seeds. You need to buy enough fertilizer. I mean, we are a country which can be taught that, you need to use X fertilizer. We are a country where smallholder farmers, all the way to large scale, know the value of fertilizer, know the value of improved seed. And so we can't be the ones who are now being told to buy open pollinated variety. We are not that kind of people anymore. Labor has gone up by 100%. Labor in farms, and most of the labor in farms now, they ask for US dollars when you are working on a local currency. All these market distortions, we are talking about how do we meet the NDS1? You cannot meet that NDS1 when you allow market distortions to be happening. Market distortions in input, market distortions in labor, all those productive inputs that you require. Let me tell you, if you buy fuel yourself, you buy it between, I don't know, between $1.15 or whatever, if you're buying diesel in bulk. But if you're going to buy it through facilities that have been put in place, it's as high as $1.65. So a farmer will be thinking they're getting a deal. It's not a deal. And it will all add up into the cost. When it adds up into the cost, that's when your average farmer gets 5 tons a hectare in maize. That is not acceptable, especially for a large-scale commercial farmer. That's when you hear of a communal farmer getting 700 kilograms per hectare. Not acceptable, because for us to have gone through the first and the second agricultural revolution, that actually required farmers to use the right inputs so that they can be able to realize. That's how Zimbabwe became self-sufficient. We're able to sell. Why are we wanting to bring up our production? We want to bring up our production because it feeds into the manufacturing sector. Zimbabwe needs to actually look at the manufacturing sector as the sector that will take it into the NDS 1 to Vision 2030, NDS 1 and 2. And to do that, we need the manufacturing sector functioning, not importing soybean so that soybean oil can be made here. No, the farmers here should be able to do that. But to do that, those are some of the production issues that I talked about, where we need to fix our input and output issues. So I'm not going to dwell with issues to do with the issue when they say, when agriculture sneezes, the manufacturing sector catches pneumonia. So I think when we do discussions, those are some of the issues that I'm going to talk about, to say, what does it take for the manufacturing industry not to ever catch pneumonia? And what does it take to get agriculture moving from where it was or where it is to meet that Vision 2030 of an upper middle income economy? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hungwe, for highlighting some of the challenges that you are facing, or that you've gone into research on in terms of our agricultural sector at the moment. But I want to touch on something. I know we've got time for a discussion later. Land tenure is a big issue in Zimbabwe. And so I wanted you to just frame for us as an academic, but then also as somebody who is practicing farming. What have you seen the impact of our land tenure policy? What has that been for you practically, and what have you noted in the communities that you've observed? So here I'm talking about the lack of whether it's permits or leases, or it's something that somebody could use if they wanted to take their matter or use the lands that they're working on as collateral or as security for whatever reason. Maybe just very quickly, what have you seen has been an impact there?
Thank you so much on that one when it comes to land tenure issues. We were excited as farmers, also as people in the industry, when we heard that there's been an agreement, a global agreement between our farmers, the white farmers, and the Ministry of Finance, the government of Zimbabwe. I think that was a step in the right direction. And I think we also need to have that issue solved and sorted as soon as possible, so that we can just go ahead with the real business at hand, which is how do we solve the food security, and how do we solve the food insecurity, and how do we ensure that agriculture puts in a lot of input into the manufacturing sector. So as a farmer, the tenures, I must say, it does not mean when you are in a smallholder sector in the communal area, you have security of tenure. All tenures have problems as long as certain issues are not dealt with, isn't it? There are basket things that they have to be able to fulfill. You have to feel secure, you have to be able to get funding with the same tenure, you have to right of refusal, you have the right to remain there, right? All sorts of rights that you need to be in, the basket of rights that you need to adhere to. So farmers in the A1, A2 sector, they have also faced the same problems of getting access to cheap finance. Banks are not able to finance farming, most of the commercial banks. When I was a young girl, I worked for a financing institution, and farmers would have a choice of getting funding from what was called Barclays then, what was called Standard Bank then, what was called Zim Bank then, whatever the names they were able to get financing. That is no longer possible. So you then rely on one player, who is CBZ. When you rely on one player, you remove competition. And competition is necessary in an institution and in a country. Because of that, our, the offer letters which people use. The government has been trying actually to see how they can ensure that the offer letter becomes a bankable document to use when you want to get funding. So we're hoping that when that works, then there's a whole basket of institutions that can be involved in terms of funding agriculture. And as for people being expelled from farms, I think that has gone away. People feel secure in their farming enterprises, and the land audits that has been done, I think, I'm not sure how far it has gone because we have not had access to the findings. That also should be able to allow those who are not productive on the farms to move so that it can allow for serious farmers to be on that land.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Hungwe, for those words. Please, of course, like I said, we're going to have a discussion on everything that you've talked about shortly. I want to invite now Tawanda Namusi. Tawanda is a man with vast experience in financial reporting, financial systems, in strategic planning, but he's also currently the Chief Executive Officer of Interfresh. And he's been extensively involved in agricultural and agro-processing sectors with a key focus on producing and exporting high-quality fresh produce and allied processed products. So Tawanda, I'm going to invite you to unmute your mic and obviously turn on your video. What have we've just heard from Dr. Hungwe on some of the challenges that she's experienced and she's noted in the agricultural sector. But what are the opportunities? You are especially in the horticultural space. Talk to us about some of the opportunities that you've seen and the value chains that have been created in the horticultural industry, and how can these be used to achieve Vision 2030? Tawanda, I'll hand over to you.
Good morning to all our distinguished panelists, as well as our audience watching us on the various platforms. It's an absolute pleasure to join you and to participate in this particular conversation. It's a conversation that's very dear to me, in particular when we talk about, as Belinda, as you have framed it, the two sort of mega sectors, or at least the low-hanging fruit, if I can put it that way, in terms of getting us back on track in terms of the trajectory which we want to go and to develop this country. To answer you, reference where our opportunities lie, I'm just going to do a bit of a parallel with Kenya, and I will my brief talk will be split possibly into 3 sections, just to give you a snapshot of Kenya, a snapshot of Zimbabwe, and then finally just a bridge in terms of some of the suggestions in terms of how do we improve on our current circumstances and realize and actualize the potential that we have as a country. Now, in the year 2020, assuming an exchange rate of about $1 to 80 Kenyan shillings, the Kenyan horticultural sector exports amounted to 1.3 billion US dollars. In 2019, it was a little bit 10 billion. It was about 100 million less, rather, at 1.27 billion United States dollars. Now, in my observation, I'm looking at what are the key markets that Kenya is playing in. They're playing in the European Union. They're playing in China. They're playing in Russia, in the Middle East, the Arabian Peninsula, if you want to call it that. And they go to some sophisticated markets as far afield as Japan, for example. Now, if I focus more on these exports, I'm looking at 20% of the throughput and output in the horticultural space from a Kenyan perspective is coming from agriculture. It's coming from horticulture per se, so excuse me. Now, in this horticulture space, you have avocados accounting for 20% of this throughput. Now, if I unpack it a little bit further, what is the structure of agricultural production, avocado production in Kenya? It's basically smallholder farmers consisting 70% of the throughput. Now, Kenya exports up to about 90,000 tons of avocados globally, and they are taking them into various sectors in the world. Kenya is rated possibly is number 7, the 7th largest producer of avocados in the world currently. So they're a phenomenal player in that regard. How do they do this? If I continue focusing on avocados, you have a hub and spoke system where you have a centralized packer and then a sprinkling of smallholder farmers around them. So they aggregate, process the product, and ensure that that product finds its way into the international markets in a manner that allows for the quality to be maintained and for the logistics and the logistical planning support and the appropriate marketing to occur. Now, this is quite poignant for me, because if I flip across now to the Zimbabwean scenario, according to Zimtrade, as at June, the horticultural space had just crossed $30 million. So that's what we are talking about. So if you, in very simplistic terms, assume you double that to the end of the year, you're looking at 60, maybe $70 million, less than 10% of what Kenya is managing to achieve in its space. You look at the core competencies. Can we do avocados, for example, in this country? Yes, we can. We used to give the Kenyans a good run for their money in the floriculture or cut flower industry many years ago. We peaked at our peak, we had about 250 hectares of land under greenhouse plastic, and we were producing the various varieties of flowers in this particular nation, and we were very successful going into the European Union. You look at our ability to work with smallholder farmers. We've got established models, established irrigation schemes that were set up over the last decades that have capacity to produce. The water is there, the infrastructure is there. Then the one thing you can't do is, you know that Zimbabweans are not shying away from rolling up their sleeves and putting the work in. When I look at it from that perspective, I'm seeing blueberries also. There's actually the Blueberry Producers Association of Zimbabwe under the Horticultural Development Council. We are seeing citrus investments that are happening in the country. We have been very successful in producing fresh produce. We have a lot of storied institutions from years ago. One talks of the Mitchell and Mitchells of this world, and then a little bit earlier than that, you would speak of the Condozis of this world as the big players that were immediately identifiable in that era. As Dr. Murisa said in his opening remarks, that we've gone through a reorientation of the agricultural space in this country. But the one thing that is true for me, when I come back again to the sort of markets and the market access that's there to Zimbabwe, we do have European partnership agreements, which gives us access into the EU, just like Kenya. We have exported to places like Russia, just like Kenya. Quite recently, I'm aware that trade protocols have been finalized. And Zimtrade had indicated that, for example, in the citrus space, again, just like Kenya, we have access to the Chinese, a massive market in China that is also becoming available to us as Zimbabweans, as Zimbabwean farmers in the various subsectors in the agricultural space. When you look at it, tobacco, China is a very significant player. Is one of the major markets, is the reports from the Tobacco Industry and Marketing Board suggest that they are there. So we do have access to that. And the Middle Eastern market is a market that has come in leaps and bounds, particularly in the last couple of years, in the more recent times. So again, access to the Arabian Peninsula is there. The Americas are there. There are some traditional markets that have never gone away, and it's boiling down to what can we do as Zimbabweans. Now, having said that, I've sort of set a picture for you that Kenya is on about 1.3 billion in horticultural exports as a subsector of the agricultural space in their economy. We are, from a horticultural space, lagging behind. Clearly, our numbers and the information suggests that we've got a long way to go, particularly for us to match Kenya. But we can, and we have the infrastructure. And herein maybe is where the excitement and the opportunity lies for us. With China opening up, for those of you who follow what happened in South Africa in the markets when the Chinese protocols were signed up in various sectors where the South Africans did not have to go indirectly into the Chinese market, but directly into the Chinese market, there is a big uptick from performance, profitability, sustainability of various operations in that regard. That gives us transformation. So you're finding that some of these agreements, and Zimbabwe is not getting left behind in this, these are very transformative to the various industries. If our blueberry farmers have access to the Chinese market, there's massive pull, and again, it's transformative. When you look at returns, it's giving you options to weigh Far East, Middle East, Africa trade, which should not be ignored at all, as well as the European bloc. It's giving you access to a variety of markets. So you can look at one market, look at the one that gives you a better return. Look at markets. Some markets are easier to enter than others because of the regulations that are the phytosanitary regulations that come, food safety regulations that come with each market. So when you look at it, there is a very, very strong upside to what's been happening. If I pull you back, colleagues, to what's been happening in this country, one is to drive around to see the number of center pivots, particularly in the recent past, that have gone up in this country. One is to look at what, as Dr. Murisa had mentioned, climate smart solutions. We are now subject to the rain pattern now and 30, 40 years ago are completely different. And that's part and parcel of the effects of climate change. Either you have a cyclone, lots of rain, or no rain at all, or you have a lot of rain, but it constitutes into a very short window, and then that changes your rainfall distribution pattern, which should work with the phenology of your crop as it grows through the various phases up until you get to a stage where you're reaping and harvesting. Now, all those suggest to me that there is a quiet transformation that is happening in our agricultural space. The fact that center pivots are going up and are going up in significant numbers suggests that we are increasing our capacity from an irrigable space. If that is dovetailed to what we have noticed and have observed, that the government has been working on dams and water infrastructure regarding that, some fairly big projects have gone up. I know Causeway Dam was commissioned. That's in the Mashonaland East space. We've had Togwem Kosi, which was commissioned a couple of years ago, to much aplomb and much fanfare that are associated with that. And then there's talk, and you see it even on the handles of the powers that be on Twitter and all the other social media, that there seems to be a concerted effort coming out of government in terms of harnessing the water. Now, that's very, very important. First, you need the water, you need the land, and ultimately you need the inputs. As Dr. Hungwe has already mentioned, some of the challenges that are there in terms of the inputs that are available to us. But however, if I pull it back and look at it to say, look, we have a gap if we are using Kenya as a benchmark, just for reference purposes. We can do avocados. Kenya has 7,500 estimated hectares of under active avocado production. Some of it is small scale. We are talking 5 to 20 trees per homestead, and it's all aggregating. When it aggregates, it's producing this machine, which is propelling Kenya to be the currently the seventh most successful avocado producer in the world. The Kenyan flowers are well known, as I've already alluded to. Now, all that can be replicated in Zimbabwe, and there is massive opportunity for us to carefully consider and look at it that way. All the irrigation schemes that have been set up, that I think the Minister of Lands and Agriculture has reiterated and has spoken, particularly in the last 4 weeks, about looking at irrigation schemes and trying to see how we can maximize the production coming out of that. Now, the important things that I would say are big takeaways when you look at the opportunities. We have similar access to markets, as I have already shown you earlier on. We have a strong heritage of producing in this country. We grew up going to school and being told our economy is an agro-based economy, and it meant when agriculture did well, the economy would do well, and when agriculture had a less than ideal year, the ramifications and the multiplier effects throughout the economic sectors would be felt and would be heard, and that's important. As I sum up what would I say is important for us to realize the potential? Number one, we're looking at inclusivity. Estates can do it on their own and produce as an island. Some of the commercial setups can do that again as an island, but if we want full transformation, then we have to include as many of us as possible and be as successful, for example, as Kenya. We need to be able to address the funding elements and the funding aspects of it. One would look for the floriculture industry in Zimbabwe. One would know that Rabobank in the Netherlands did provide very significant lines of credit to some of the banks here in Zimbabwe, and that allowed for rapid acceleration and development post 2000 of some of the rose and flower farming operations in this country, and that allowed us to be a formidable force. We need to consider and look at some of the risk factors, access to markets. What do I mean by access to markets? I'm breaking it down into two very interesting aspects. Number one is the necessary certifications that come with playing in the markets that you want to play in. It might involve being non-GMO or organic, and playing in that space, which has a huge premiums to look at, number one. Number two, it's looking at it from the point of view of sticking with your global gaps, dealing with your SMETA, Rainforest Alliance, and all those things. And then thirdly, another opportunity that's there is for us to also try and take advantage of some of the incentives that are there. I do know, for example, that if you are an entity that's working in the space of providing outgrower services, technical services, and marketing opportunities, there are provisions at law, and one can refer to the Finance Act of 2018 to see that some of you can claim some of those costs, which enhance things for us. Now, on the access to markets, the other part that we probably need to consider now quite carefully is the logistical aspect. For those of you who know, when South Africa had its disturbances, our main artery to get to the port, being to Durban, was greatly disturbed for no less than 2 weeks. Immediately after that, Transnet in South Africa had a cyber attack, which literally sent all shipping lines back to 1990, let me put it that way, where it had to be logs, everything was manual, and that does have a knock-on effect. So if we are producing up here in Zimbabwe, we need to start thinking around what ports, how are we going to access, what infrastructure do we have to enable us to produce our produce, and to move it along into the markets as best as we can. Obviously, one always wants to look at a government to help us a little bit more with their policies, export retentions on exports, to look at tax incentives, and also the human capital side to develop those skills, because there has been some brain drain, but I think we need to get that pipeline filled again, and that will allow us to get to 2030, meet our targets, and start hunting that 1 billion mark, and to start shaving it off year after year. So I believe we have got massive opportunities. I haven't even touched on the potential crops that we can grow. At least if you look at the maps, a third of Zimbabwe is always open for us to grow a variety of very, very high-end produce within our horticultural space that gives us the ability to generate a lot of foreign currency and ultimately, from a trickle-down perspective, enhance the livelihoods of the ordinary Zimbabweans, whether be it a smallholder farmer all the way to the corporate and the mega operations that are in this country. So I would leave it at that, Belinda, for now, in terms of my contribution at the minute.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Tawanda. A quick question. You referred to a model that's used in Kenya, conglomeration of smallholder farmers coming together with a central packing, space. So that obviously speaks of a huge amount of not just communication, but then also collaboration, different communities collaborating maybe with buyers outside the country. That obviously that's one model, and I'm sure we've got similar models here. But looking even beyond Kenya, because I'm sure you've got different examples from different countries, where have you seen the best models for kind of bringing about sort of inclusive growth in the different countries that you worked in? I'm sure some countries have different, slightly different ways of approaching the same problem. Have you seen something that you've said, you know what, this is it, this is the winner, something that we could employ here in Zimbabwe?
Okay, that's a good question, Belinda. What I would probably say, it's not necessarily a cut and paste approach, but it's borrowing on pieces. If you look at Zimbabwe, for example, let's go to Rusitu Valley. If you go into the Rusitu Valley, we have the genesis of successful smallholder involvement. We already have, as part of government and as a part of the ministry, our RX Agricultural Extension Services, who are, when you look at the history of them, they are part and parcel of the history of the country and the success of agriculture in this country for many, many years. You look at the ability for those communities who have been wired to work, whether it's bananas. So for example, if you go, Rusitu Valley used to be very strong in banana production, and it's small blocks of land producing, bringing through to a grading shed, a packing shed, an aggregator would pick and send to the market. If you go to Onde Valley, you will see exactly the same thing. If you come to irrigation schemes, if you go to Middle-Sabi in Chief Mutema's district, there is a successful banana project going on there. You can come to Negomo irrigation that I have personal working experience with them. And at one point they would produce plus 2 million kgs of citrus to be made available. And this is coming off smallholder blocks. But if you take it further, again, if you go to South America, if you go to Peru, if you go to Chile, you will see those models. Argentina, you will see those models working and producing the crops. I think what is vitally important, particularly when you're dealing on trying to find a more inclusive nature, is transparency is key.
Yeah.
Access to market is even better, because normally what's happened, and if you speak to the residents of some of the areas I've spoken about in Zimbabwe, they will tell you of years gone by where a particular company would come and buy the produce. But when that company, for whatever reason, was no longer available, it really had a significant impact on livelihoods. If you look at paprika, the standards, the global standard for paprika was done here in Zimbabwe. That's how they do it. And we were a top producer of paprika. We are not there at the moment, but therein lies the opportunity. The climate is there, the soil is there, the microclimate within the country is absolutely perfect to do some of those things. So it's not necessarily one particular model, but it's copy and paste on certain elements to come up with a holistic and a meaningful solution that can be exploited for overall gain.
Okay, wow, brilliant. Thank you so much, Tawanda. That was a great overview. I know it was a lot of information to try to pack into 10 minutes, but you did a great job, so well done. So next up, I'm going to invite Mutuso Dhliwayo. Mutuso is the Executive Director and one of the founder members of the Zimbabwe Environmental Law Association. Obviously the Zimbabwe Environmental Law Association, commonly known as ZELA, is a public interest law organization that works to promote good governance, sustainable development, transparency, and accountability, especially to do with natural resources. So his particular area of research is obviously in business, human rights, transboundary natural resource management, wildlife, and the extractive sector. Now, Mutuso, I'm going to invite you to unmute your mic and share your video. And I think for you, the question would be looking at our mining sector. I think we'll probably want to make the shift to mining now. Just kind of give us an overview of where mining is in Zimbabwe today. You know, it can be a very extractive sector. So obviously there's lots of opportunities in there, but there's also a lot of waste, not just of resources going through channels that are informal, but also in terms of natural resources. So kind of trying to balance all of those. What's the state of the mining sector today? And broadly speaking, where would you say the opportunities and the challenges lie? Okay, Mutuso, if you can hear me. Okay, all right. Maybe Mutuso is having some challenges. I'll just ask my team to check on him. I think I'll move then very quickly to our next speaker, who is involved in mining. So, like I said, we want to make the shift to mining. We've talked quite a lot about agriculture and, the challenges, the opportunities, and some of the major issues that we need to be looking at in the agricultural sector at the moment. I would like to call upon Payne. He's one of the founders and CEO, he's current CEO of the Young Miners Foundation. It's a trust organization that was established in 2020 to advance and upscale young people and their participation in mining enterprise development. So specifically starting companies involved in the mining sector. So Payne, if you are able to unmute your mic and turn on your video, just talk to us very quickly about what you are experiencing as a young miner in Zimbabwe. And obviously you represent a major group of people who are involved in the mining sector, young people wanting to become a part of that mining community. It's not easy. I'm sure it's quite capital intensive. But from your perspective, what are the opportunities and the challenges that you are seeing to get more involvement of youth, of women, and previously marginalized groups? So I'll invite you to unmute your mic and to turn on your video and just talk to us about that.
Okay, thank you so much, Belinda. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, I can hear you and I can see you clearly.
Okay, thank you so much, esteemed delegates and all participants and all those who are following this program all over the world. I'm from the Young Miners Foundation, where we represent young people between 18 to 40 who are attempting more meaningful mining enterprises in terms of formalization and in terms of conducting mining as a business. So we are decentralized in every province of this country, where we have organized young people who are attempting to engage into more formalized and environmentally friendly mining opportunities. Apparently, most of the challenges that we face as young people who are into mining is basically funding. You see, mining is capital intensive, and most of the young people who are involved in small scale mining, in particular, have never been engaged in gainful employment. They've never had enough savings to start a meaningful mining enterprise. Apparently, the major challenge that we've been having is after maybe attaining the mining right, which is a key element of in terms of formalization, getting to own a claim or getting to participate formally. Now the next step would be funding. Now this part of the suboptimal exploitation of this mineral all over the country has been affected with funding, because there's been alternative funding model, traditional alternative funding models that has been used before. It's proved not to work out well, because investors have lost serious money, and financial institutions have also actually lost serious money in trying to invest in small scale mining. So apparently we are trying to try and convince potential investors and engage potential partners who are willing to then assist us in terms of maybe loans, equity or mezzanine, or any kind of funding arrangement that can assist in boosting efficiency gains in small scale mining. And you want to agree with me that as youth we contribute around about 65% of the demographic structure of our country, and women also contribute 52.8. We are also engaging young women into our mining programs, because it has been a male-dominated industry where women didn't have a space to actually participate. So in trying to formalize, we are bringing them on board in terms of partnerships or in terms of professional end, because there are some young people who actually went to Zimbabwe School of Mines, did geology, some did survey, some did any other professional course in mining, hoping to get a meaningful job from an established mining house in the name of Zimplats, Mimosa, Unke. But these companies are failing to then to absorb all these graduates. So by developing our small scale mining projects into medium scale, we believe we can then create employment for these young people who are graduating from school. We are approaching mining from a more professional, ambitious perspective, because we are, from my understanding, since 1980, the project that we have known from, which grew from small scale to medium scale, I only know less than 5, which I won't mention by name. But since then, the small scale mining has always been small, medium scale, medium, and large. So it remains our responsibility, therefore, as young people, to actually professionalize and formalize these small scale mining projects, so that they can also grow from small to medium scale. There are some projects we saw in Tanzania, for example, which were developed from very small mining enterprises up to medium scale, which has developed the mining sector of their country, which has also created employment, and which has also boosted the bullion in terms of minerals like gold of the mining industry. And again, some of the major issues that we face in terms of trying to approach mining as a business is knowledge. There is a serious knowledge gap in the mining sector. There are people who do not even know how to secure a mining right. There are people who do not even know how to meet all the statutory instruments in terms of running a formalized mining enterprises. So I think trainings would also come on board in view of educating the small scale miner to approach mining as a business, not as a poverty-driven initiative or as a get-rich-quick, because there is so much potential in mining in terms of gold, chrome, gemstones all around the country. But if it is approached from an informal perspective, without formal regularization of the system from along the value chain, then we are never going to be accountable of the minerals that we are extracting underground, to then even know, are we making a profit, or is the country benefiting from the extraction? Yes, we can say small scale mining has contributed much in the gold deliveries to Fidelity. But I will tell you that most of the gold that is being extracted in small scale mining is being lost. The percentage of gold that is being delivered to Fidelity is far too less than the gold that we are losing. It applies to all the minerals, gemstones, and all around the country, because the system is not formalized. As long as we do not know who is doing what where, then we will never get to know, are we progressing in terms of developing our mining industry to medium scale or to large scale. Then there's security issues in terms of small scale mining. People lose their deposits, hard work, equipment being lost, some people being injured, losing lives, because the security structure is not clear so much that it can attract even investment. Who would want to invest in a society where there is so much rogueness, where there is no security, where there is no guarantee whether the returns on investment will be recovered? So we are as a group of young people who are desirous to engage into more meaningful mining enterprise and to see our country become better. We are also trying to set up security systems that protect investment, that protect even the workers, that protect even the miner who is on the ground. Then lastly, there are issues of trust. You see, I remember sometime we went to Cape Town to try and market the opportunities that we have in small scale mining, right through the value chain, from exploration to extraction and even to processing and value addition. You see, the issues that were being raised by potential investors who were saying they want to come in and invest in Zimbabwe were issues of trust. There are people who have left so much money in trying to invest in small scale mining, and most of them never managed to get an opportunity to then follow up with what really happened to the investment that they made. So I think it boils down to departments like ZELA. If someone is coming to invest in the country, what is the procedure? What is the process that is going to be done so much that an investor is confident in the investment package they are bringing back home? Thank you so much for the opportunity she gave me.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kapoor, for that presentation. Now, just quickly, very quickly, you talked obviously about funding, knowledge gaps, and then just a lack of formalization in the system, and of course, trust. Now, I would just want to focus on the lack of formalization, because a lot of our artisanal miners fall into that category. And now, if you were to be asked what kind of policy should be put in place for obviously the formalization, but then also just to create more sanity, around how artisanal miners are operating, what would you say that policy should involve, or what should that policy contain? What are the key things that maybe policymakers should be thinking about when they're thinking about the artisanal miners and how to regulate that industry?
Okay, thank you so much, Belinda. I think formalization moves hand in glove with professionalization. Why young people are shy, why young people are moving away from actually formalizing their mining projects is because they feel that they've not been given enough opportunity to actually run their projects formally. For example, most young people who are involved in small scale mining do not own mining titles, mining rights, not because they do not want to have the mining titles, but we have cases, of course, isolated cases that we know of young people who have identified areas with good deposits, and for some reason they then fail to actually have to claim ownership on those pieces of land, maybe in terms of issues of structural issues, whereby someone comes in or in muscle out young people who want to register that claim as a proper mining entity. And again, it also comes back to the issue of the knowledge gap that I highlighted before. Young people need to be constantly be taught and enlightened, and also incentivized if possible. If you formalize your mining enterprise, there are A, B, C, D benefits attached to formalizing their mining enterprises. I think an approach, an incentivizing approach could be better than a punitive approach whereby people are coming in and then try and sue someone who is involved in what is referred to as informal mining. I think to incentivize and to then encourage, we will give more confidence to young people to then want to formalize their mining enterprises. So I think they need to be incentivized, and they need to be given, there should be an equal opportunity for everyone in the country to claim mining rights. But even if I am young, if I identify an area where I want to claim, it should be easy for me to claim that area. not that because I am young and someone else comes in because they're coming in from a higher office, or there's some there's some power behind which they can then use to do. Recently, we're fighting an issue of EPOs, where most productive areas in the country are under EPOs, which are exclusive prospecting orders, where big companies have claimed those areas to say they are prospecting for bigger mining activities. But young people would also want to peg small claims, 10-hectare claims of gold, 25-hectare claims of chrome in those pieces of areas. Because how can we be talking of formalization when all areas which have good deposits of formalizing the areas are left to then being claimed by bigger institutions? And again, there is an issue of disputes. This is my last point. The ministry should actually be serious on the issue of dispute resolution in terms of the cadastral system that was being discussed earlier on, to then say who is owning this piece of land and where is the demarcation, so that people do not fight over pieces of land and over boundaries. So I think there should be an electronic system of claim registration to avoid the manipulation of also the MMD officials, because there's been a lot of corruption in terms of you want to peg a claim, and someone comes in with more money. They can then pay the peggers or the surveyors, so that the one who has more money can get mining rights, and because you don't have so much money than the other person. So as young people, I think the system should just be modern and efficient, so much that it gives room for us to formalize our mining projects.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Mr. Kapoor, for that presentation. I'm going to go back to Mutuso Dhliwayo now. I'd introduced him earlier. He's the the Chief Executive Officer of the Zimbabwe Environmental Law Association, also known as ZELA. So Mutuso, I'll invite you to unmute your mic and to turn on your video. And if you could talk to us about, I know Mr. Kapoor has already talked to us about, some aspects of the mining industry, but more broadly speaking, kind of frame for us, what is the state of mining? What are some of the opportunities and also the challenges that we're experiencing in making mining sustainable at the moment?
Thank you very much, Belinda. And let me start by apologizing. I was cut off. There was a power cut off here, and I was transitioning into another source of power. So that's why I missed out. So apologies for that. And I'm not very confident with my connection here. So I just turned on the video so that people see who is speaking. But I'll proceed to turn off the video because I'm not very sure in terms of my bandwidth here. It may end up. And if I get cut off during the presentation because of the unstable network, please just bear with me. I'll be able to reconnect again. Yeah, so thank you very much. I think good morning to you all. And I would like to thank the Severe Institute for giving me this opportunity to share with you my perspectives in terms of the state of the mining sector in Zimbabwe. I think the name is already introduced, is Mutuso Dhliwayo, and I work for the Zimbabwe Environmental Law Association, and we work on mineral resource governance. So I think the starting point, and Dr. Murisa alluded to this in his opening remarks, that as a country, Zimbabwe has got a significant and diverse mineral resource base, which if managed prudently and judiciously, and let me put that clear to say, if it is managed prudently and judiciously, then it can be a catalyst for economic revival, stabilization, and growth. I think we all agree that as a country, over the past 20 years, we have gone through some very serious problems that are related to our economy, that are related to our governance. And all this has affected our economic growth as a country. But the mining sector actually has that potential that can actually help us to have economic revival, to stabilize, then eventually grow. I think Dr. Murisa in his opening remarks talked about the mining sector as a possible game changer. And this is not far-fetched, because if we know very well that Zimbabwe itself is a highly mineralized country. And even one of the reasons why we are colonized was because of the mineral resource base that we have as a country. If you look at the history of the right concession, it was all about minerals. And this significant mineral resource is what has resulted in Zimbabwe in some circles being called the Persian Gulf of minerals. It shows that we have those significant mineral resources. But now we don't have just minerals only, but we also now have the potential for oil. I think when you look at the prospecting that is happening in Muzaraban, in the Zambezi Valley, then Agase as well. So all those actually add to what we can use in terms of reviving the economy. And we know that some countries globally and even within the region have actually developed based on their mineral resources. Here we are not talking just about mineral resources, we're also talking about oil and gas. So all these are very critical, and these can actually play that catalytic role in terms of reviving the economy. But let me also point out that the mere presence of minerals, oil or gas, represents what is called a comparative advantage. And that is according to the African Mining Vision, which is one of the foremost mineral resource governance, which was adopted by the African Union in 2009. So the most important thing, or the most challenging thing, is how do you turn that comparative advantage into competitive advantage? And I think that's where we have significant problems as a country. Because if we are unable to turn that comparative advantage into competitive advantage, I think we've got that potential to suffer from the provincial natural resource curse. I think I would pose this as a question to us as participants. We are all Zimbabweans, or at least we know about Zimbabwe, to say, when we reflect in terms of the mineral wealth that we have, the resources that we have, that significant diverse mineral resource base, where do we stand? Are we experiencing the natural resource curse? Are we developing from those resources? Let me just leave it there, and let's hope that we'll be able to reflect on that. So when you look at the mining sector itself, I think in terms of the Zimbabwe Geological Survey, it says we have got about 65 minerals, of which 40 are currently being exploited, and the potential to exploit more and to explore more. So again, all that speaks about that rich mineral resource base that we have. I'm not a practitioner like the previous speaker, but I think even from that policy perspective, I think I understand the importance of the mining sector in terms of Zimbabwe's economic recovery. So one has even said that this could actually be the messiah in terms of ensuring that the economy grows. And that is because when you look at the indicators for the other sectors of the economy, like agriculture, of course, we've just said from Dr. Hungwe that it's actually on the way to recover. But I think when you compare the potential to the mining sector in terms of where it stands now, I think when you look at tourism, when you look at transport, when you look at the construction industry, manufacturing as well, you realize that maybe the mining sector is the only sector that has got that potential. So in terms of contributing to the economy, its potential and contributions are undoubted. It contributes directly to the gross domestic product. Employment creation is another area where the mining sector does contribute. Then, of course, infrastructure development or shared infrastructure development. Dr. Murisa made reference to the road that is made by Unkim, which he uses when he goes to his village. And that's part of the shared infrastructure. Then, of course, more than 60% of exports, in terms of all the exports that we do in Zimbabwe, 60% is basically related to the mining sector. And it is also a significant earner of foreign currency. And of course, it also attracts foreign direct investment. And of course, the significance or the importance of the mining sector is reflected in a number of policy documents, including this Vision 2030 that we talk about. So when you look at it, there is a section there that deals with mining. There's also the US 12 billion mining economy industry by 2023 strategy, which says that by 2023, the mining sector should be bringing in 12 billion. And again, that's very significant. Then even when you look at the National Development Strategy 1, to a large extent, its achievement is reliant on the mining sector. Then you also look at some reforms that are ongoing, the ease of doing business reforms. All these are actually, again, aimed at strengthening the mining sector. And of course, when you look at the national budget statements, I think there's no budget statement that is made each year without making reference to the importance of the mining sector. And even the just ended stabilization plan, it also devoted a significant part to the mining sector in terms of what it can do to promote economic development and revival. So all this shows that the mining sector is indeed critical, and we have the resources that can actually anchor economic development based on the mining sector. And in terms of actors, there are a number of actors that are there, and these include the following: the private sector. It is a big player there. You look at the likes of Ungi, the likes of Anglo, the likes of Zimplats, Rio Tinto, Murowa, and all those. But we also have some state-owned enterprises as well that are also participating, primarily through the Zimbabwe Mining Development Corporation, which is a state-owned enterprise. Then there's also the Minerals Marketing Corporation of Zimbabwe. They also play a very important role. Of course, we have a number of joint ventures that are actually being held in partnership with these state-owned enterprises. And we have joint ventures with the Chinese, the Russians. And of course, even our security sector is also a key player in terms of the mining sector through their investment arm called the Rusununguku or Nguluke Holdings. And of course, we have the significant players in terms of the artisanal small-scale miners, what we know as Macrocosa. It is estimated that about 1 million people are directly involved, and 3 million are indirectly involved in the artisanal small-scale mining sector. So that shows that it is a huge sector. And even in terms of the numbers, at one point in terms of gold deliveries, there was actually that thinking that they were actually bringing more than the large-scale miners. So again, it shows that this is a very important sector that is there. Then the legal framework is also very critical in terms of regulating this sector. Of course, we have the Mines and Minerals Act, Chapter 2105. Then, of course, there are also other legal developments that are happening, like the Mines and Minerals Amendment Bill, which hasn't been finalized. There's also the Gold Trade Act, the Environmental Management Act, Chapter 2027. Then, of course, the Zimbabwe Mining Development Corporation Act. There's also the Draft Minerals Policy of 2012. Of course, there's the Rural District Councils Act, the Water Act, Finance Act, and a number of statutory instruments. All these help in terms of regulating the sector itself. And I think one of the issues that I was asked to focus on was basically the opportunities for the inclusion of women and youth. We've just had a good presentation from the previous speaker in terms of looking at how youth can actually be included in the sector, and also build on that. So I think affirmative action can also be very useful in terms of the quota systems that will enable women and youth to access mining claims in the sector, because this is a very big issue in terms of getting the claims, and the times the youth and the women are marginalized because of the way how it is done. Then, of course, the need to involve women and youth in the policy and decision-making processes. This is very important because normally when these decisions are made, if they are not at the table, then they are marginalized. So involving them in the policy and decision-making process is very critical. It's a way of involving them. Then, of course, there is also a need for these associations, women and youth associations. I think this also helped them in terms of mobilizing, in terms of advocating for their own interests, for their own issues. This is also very critical. Then, of course, loans are also important, making that deliberate attempt to make sure that loans are accessible. I think the issues do with the collateral security, which some people may not have in terms of youth and women. So how do you make these loans accessible to them? And of course, the provision of technical and development skills. These are also very important. These can actually act as important incentives for the participation of women and youth in the mining sector. Value addition and beneficiation. This is also critical because this will open opportunities for women within the mining value chains, and the same as women as well. So this is also very important. But there are a lot of challenges that can actually affect this potential of the mining sector to become a game changer and help in terms of the achievement of Vision 2030. So that move towards upper middle income economy by year 2030, to a large extent, as I've indicated, is anchored on the mining sector. But if we don't address some of the challenges that are there within that sector, then that vision may remain a pipeline dream. And I'm going to outline some of those challenges that I see that may affect the potential of the mining sector to become a game changer in terms of the achievement of Vision 2030. First and foremost, the legal framework is very problematic. We have this very old archaic legal framework in the form of the Mines and Minerals Act of 1961, which was enacted during the colonial era. And when you look at the people that it was meant to serve then, and when you look at the development that have happened since after independence, we talk about artisanal miners. They are not even recognized under the Mines and Minerals Act, but we are saying that these are critical players. So how does this regulatory framework serve their interests? So that's a big problematic there. So we need to make sure that the Mines and Minerals Act is reformed so that it is reflective of our aspirations as a country since the achievement of independence, and also reflecting the realities that are there on the ground. This has not happened. There has been attempts to review the Mines and Minerals Act beginning 2007, and up to now we are in 2021, and all this has not succeeded. I think there were some serious attempts in 2017, but again, the Mines and Minerals Amendment Bill is still out there without being finalized. So there are big problems there. So one of the things that may need to be done is basically to review the Mines and Minerals Act and finalize it through the Mines and Minerals Amendment Bill, because we hope that if that is done, then this will be able to address some of the challenges that we are currently facing. I think even as a country, we are now in 2021, and after the adoption of the Constitution in 1979, the London Constitution, we realized, Lancaster House Constitution, we realized that it was no longer in sync with our aspirations as a country, and that's why we came up with a new constitution in 2013. But here's the Mines and Minerals Act. I think when we do talk about issues to do with transparency and accountability, participation, access to information, these are very alien to the Mines and Minerals Act. Yet these are critical for making sure that the mining sector realizes its potential towards contributing Vision 2030. Again, there's also another problem, the failure to finalize the Minerals Development Policy of 2012. When you look at the policy, it's basically a statement of intent of what the government intends to do in a given sector, and in this case, the mining sector. So it should actually be able to shape the development of legislation. But again, it has been a draft since 2012, and it has seen many ministries that have changed hands, but it has not been finalized. And again, you begin to say, why are we not finalizing these very important documents? And this failure to finalize the Mines and Minerals Amendment Bill and also the Minerals Development Policy is resulting in a number of policy incoherences and inconsistencies. And no wonder why we have that chaos within the mining sector. So that's something that needs to be really looked into. Then I think the other thing that is also holding us back as we move towards Vision 2030 is lack of a mineral resource governance framework that promotes issues to do with participation, access to information, and accountability by interested and affected stakeholders. As I indicated at the beginning, we have a very well-known mineral resource governance framework known as the African Mining Vision. And that's something that should actually be able to shape the review of our legislation and the review of our policies. But that is not happening. There's also the well-known Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative supported by the World Bank. Again, that's a very important mineral resource governance framework. But in Zimbabwe, we've had challenges. In 2011, we adopted what was known as the Zimbabwe Mining Revenue Transparency Initiative, which ended with the death of the inclusive government in 2013. There have been various attempts to either revive the Zimbabwe Mining Revenue Transparency Initiative or to adopt the Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative, but all those have not materialized. So unless we come up with a mineral resource governance framework that promotes issues to do with transparency, accountability, and participation, then the full potential of the mining sector may not be fully realized. Then, of course, corruption in the mining sector in terms of the allocation of license and claims. I don't need to belabor this. The previous speaker has actually spoke about that, where some powerful people may come in and bulldoze others that have actually been given those claims. And again, that creates some sort of serious problem. So that's a big problem that needs to be looked into. And that also affects a security of tenure and also the issues of property rights. Then, of course, the lack of a cadastral system. And you begin to say, why is this so difficult as a country to come up with that cadastral system? Because it helps in terms of the allocation of mining rights, so that we don't have double allocations or quadruple allocations that results in conflicts that we are seeing within the mining sector. So that's something that needs to be sorted out, because it results in conflicts and this affects the right to property. Then, of course, there are serious illicit financial flows in the gold sector and the gemstone sector. And again, this has even been admitted by the highest office in this country, We have had those that the people that have been arrested at Johannesburg International Airport and even at our own local airport. People have been arrested. So illicit financial flows are massive there. And with illicit financial flows, then definitely Vision 2030 will not be achieved. Then lack of formalization. Again, the previous speaker has alluded to that. I don't understand why we don't formalize, because we know that this is a very big sector that is bringing in significant income. So why don't we formalize? Then also make sure that they play their part as artisanal miners in terms of contributing to the fiscal environmental rehabilitation. This has been tried, but people don't want for some specific reasons because they are benefiting from the chaos that is there. So the lack of formalization is not by coincidence, it's deliberate. There are massive benefits that are associated with that. Then of course, lack of knowledge of the extent of the geological resources that we have. How do you negotiate better? How do you negotiate deals without knowing what you have? That's a big problem. There's need for investment to know our mineral resource base and the ways that we have, so that we use that in terms of negotiating. So what normally happens is that when we are negotiating with the people, they've got better information than us. So that's why we end up negotiating poor contracts. And again, that is also critical. If you want to make sure that the mining sector's potential is fully realized, you need to negotiate better in terms of the contracts that we negotiate. But at the moment, these are poorly negotiated contracts. I see Belinda is saying, I'm running out of, let me just conclude. Then of course, the community share ownership schemes. I think there is something wrong with the Indigenization Economic Empowerment Act, but I think one of the things that it got right was this idea of community share ownership schemes that helped in terms of the social license to operate. This has been removed, and I think that was a very big mistake. This needs to be really looked into. Yes, we can address some of those shortcomings that are there, but I think in terms of community ownership schemes, this was bringing really hope to communities, because this was basically an extension of the campfire program, which is operational in the wildlife sector. And the community are beginning to see hope, but this unfortunately has been taken away. So I hope there will be that opportunity. So with that, Belinda, I conclude here. Sorry, I went a little bit over time, but I think these are issues
good. Thank you so much.
Very passionate about as an organization. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. No worries at all. This was really good. You've raised some really great points. I won't go into questions for you right away. I think I would like to hear from Carlos. Carlos Montes, I think you've been quietly listening to all the presentations that have come on board. But Carlos is with Legatum Institute. And I want to very briefly, Carlos, if you could just talk to us about so research has been done on Zimbabwe. The Legatum Institute conducted research on Zimbabwe and packaged that into a report called Pathways to Prosperity. So it's an annual report that is produced by the Institute. And we wanted to focus on the report that was done specifically for Zimbabwe, the findings that came out of that report. Carlos, if you could just talk to us very quickly about what are the key issues that you noted. So basically looking at the opportunities and also the current state of the mining and agricultural sectors when you conducted that report. And for those who are not aware, like I said, Carlos is with the Legatum Institute. He is the lead advisor for the Institute's Pathways to Prosperity program, and with a heavy focus on global best practice. And he leads many initiatives that relate to improving the scale of market-based innovations through impact investment and providing practical support to improve the capacity and integrity of country governments across the world. Carlos, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Belinda. And you have warned me to be on time, so I am not using slides or anything, and so we'll try to be quickly. But we're dealing with two as you call them mega sectors. Agriculture and mining, particularly for Zimbabwe, and they are critical not just because of their potential, but how they affect the lives of people. And I think I want to emphasize here simply, I think rather than going into the report, sort of like connecting a few points linked to the the discussion today on those two sectors, and how we can move towards, based on the experience from other countries, into an inclusive economy, as Tendai sort of mentioned, because I think that's the key. That and climate change, or making agriculture adapted to climate change, are sort of critical. I just come back from Peru, and I think Tawanda was mentioned the example of avocados, and that's interesting because Peru is the third exporter in the world of avocados. So we export $750 million of avocados. By the way, you I think also mentioned blueberries, and we export 825 million of US dollars of blueberries. So much more than Kenya, which was the comparison. And we have had also 20 years of democracy and elections and a very stable economy. And even despite of this, we elected a president on the left because the population felt, or a big part of the population felt, that they have not been part of the economy, of this inclusive economy. So that shows a little bit the importance of this area. And we launched a report on Peru in Cajamarca, which is a relatively poor region, one of the poorest regions in the country, but that also has, like Zimbabwe, really important mineral resources. Peru is also a mineral-rich sort of country. So there are $56,000 million of investment in the next few years in Peru in mining. And Cajamarca is one of these top countries. However, it is also one of the poorest regions. So that generates these difficulties. And mining, I heard about the potential and the descriptions of the sector that are consistent with, the work we have done. But mining is a sector that, in order to make it work for people, requires strong governance requirements, and governance on the side of government, not just technical, but obviously government integrity and systems and all that. And so it's a particular difficult sector to make it work. But that's the challenge. I think at the moment in some of the rankings, Zimbabwe is 75 out of 76 countries in terms of policies for mining, reflecting, some of these issues. And I agree with what has been said about, about the young miners and the role of small miners and small scale mining in and the role that it has in the future. So in what follows, I'm just going to use two of the principles that that we use in our report, borrow from the work we have done in other countries, and it's the fact that, given that the government capacity is limited in many countries, Peru, but also Zimbabwe, I think our recommendation is that the focus of government has to be only in providing tools that increase the productivity of the most vulnerable people, of the farmers the most needed, to say, or the artisanal farmers in the other case. And for the rest of the economy, the idea is to provide an enabling environment, and that would allow people to do. So we'll apply that. And then the other principle is the stewardship of natural resources. Okay, so in terms of enhancing the productivity of the most vulnerable, and the priority to give to the communal farmers, those farmers that do not have good land, they have difficult productivity, they have low productivity, and support. So the conventional thing would be the upgrading of rural roads, the micro irrigation, the farmer-led micro irrigation, catalytic investment in support of solar energy, focus on insurances. I guess, a little modification as well that we presented is a social protection that is directed to public work, guarantee public work employment. And that link to the productivity of farmers, again, with micro enterprises and all that. And so this is following the model of the Mahatma Gandhi Guarantee Program in India, and that supports agricultural work. And also, I think Ethiopia has an important program. But I think the added factor here, and this is something that we are also working or discussing in Cajamarca, this region in Peru that I mentioned that has some similarities with Zimbabwe, which is very agricultural, livestock, and mining. But it's that in order to make in an efficient way a support to farmers, there are two areas that are important. One is to support the aggregation of farmers into cooperatives, which Kenya also has done very successfully. But the other, and linked to that, is the use of digital innovations. Because I think this is a relatively easy way or economical way to reach farmers and make them less isolated, because I think that's one of the core problems of the sector. And in that, Zimbabwe has a kind of advantage in the sense that the educational levels are quite high in the region, and the penetration of mobile technology, it's also relatively okay. And so the lessons there from countries, as it was mentioned before, like Kenya on extension services, like with Farm Inc. Kenya, then Ghana and Winnesoka also on extension services, which is linking the use of Facebook, digital tools to extension services. And then, particularly in terms of climate resilient agriculture. Similarly, in terms of digital wallets or mobile payments, linking them to banking, micro lending, and index-based microinsurance. And then Acre, a company based in the UK, or NGO, sort of has worked that in Kenya, Rwanda, and Tanzania. And that, I think, those programs, that link also with the things that allow you to share assets, such as the Uberization of tractors, and Hello Tractor is an example here. Sort of, again, is something that just using catalytic funds, and maybe some countries, including I think Sri Lanka, has funds particularly dedicated to this type of innovation, funds that can even be used with impact investment sort of funds, and linked to climate change and adaptation. And also here is where these big companies, the larger companies in mining or in agriculture, could support this progress. And a similar program can be used to the artisanal and small farmers. In terms of the larger producers, and here it was discussed the importance of leases for the A2 farmers and permits for the A1 farmers. I think the idea is once once there is an economic system that is pro-investment, market-friendly, it would allow the producers to seize opportunities in this area. And then that applies also to mining, given an appropriate framework. And then if there is infrastructure that it's needed, I think that the best practice, the international best practice, is that the mining companies themselves could sort of support not just the development plans of particular region areas, as it was mentioned as well in the discussion, and so that they could contribute to the local development, but also on the roads. And the final area in terms of the stewardship of natural resources, in terms of mining, as we said, is very difficult because you really need a strong governance to allow that the resources flow both to the local area, but also to the national treasury, and that is something difficult to do, as well as to guarantee that there are no negative environmental impacts. As I mentioned, this is something that Peru also struggles at the moment, but following best practice, you can have a system that allows sharing the profits in a fair way, and as I mentioned before, for them as well to contribute in the local economy, and linking with small and artisanal miners. And to conclude, in agriculture, I think what this stewardship particularly applies to the issue of climate change, which was mentioned, the effects that is bringing. And again, that's the link with supporting innovative models that support adaptation. So I hope, Belinda, that was on time.
Yes, you were on time. Thank you so much, Carlos. I really loved one of the examples that you raised, and I wanted to just discuss that quickly with Mutuso. So Carlos was talking about how best practice is for mining development companies to contribute to the development of local assets. Now, Mutuso, from your research, is that something that you've seen taking place in Zimbabwe, or is there a gap?
No, I think what I was mentioning is that these are the opportunities. Okay,
yeah.
So I think in a way we're being very idealistic here, because the realities, as I was mentioning, even in Peru, so which is has a much higher income per capita and has had a strong economy for the last 30 years. Even in that context, it has been difficult. That agriculture that I mentioned, the agriculture that produces 750 million of avocados, at the same time has left farmers in poverty. Okay, so the mining has not contributed to the wealth of the local area, and neither the agriculture. So these models of inclusiveness come mostly from Asia. So in Asia is where you have seen companies, mining companies, getting involved effectively in the communities. Of course, in Peru there are examples, but I think, as I mentioned, this requires a high level of governance, integrity and all that. And when the economy is, is a bit more, is poorer, and there is more competition for resources, and then there is not a very transparent system, it's much more difficult to achieve. But so I think that I will only put a note of caution, in the sense that, yes, mining has an amazing potential for Zimbabwe and for many countries, but in order to make it contribute to an inclusive economy, that requires a number of steps.
Right. Okay. All right. Okay. That's fine. Thank you so much. I'm going to invite people who are in the Zoom room right now to take a poll very quickly, just to get your thoughts on everything that has been shared. You can take that as you listen to my voice, just as I read through some of the comments and some of the questions that have come through. So Moses Machikisa has made a number of comments, and you've asked some important questions. One of the questions that you asked was, for mining, how do we move from just extraction to value addition and beneficiation? There's a lot of lost revenue when we send ore outside. How can that gap be closed? My assumption is that would be for Mutuso. Moses also said, when I think it was Payne Kapoor doing his presentation, pointed out that valid point on the lived experiences of youth in mining and what needs and all the things that need to be done there. And he also just highlighted that there's need for formalization of the sector and to give opportunity for young people to participate. Moses again said that one of the beginning points is the law itself. And I think this was related to Mutuso's presentation. If the law is right, then not only is it inclusive and proper mining sectoral development, but sectoral development strategy is possible. And under inclusivity, and inclusivity is also possible when value addition and beneficiation are localized. So that's from Moses. Mutuso, I hope you got the question there. Maybe you can answer that very quickly, where he was asking how the gap of lost revenue can be closed. So I think he was referring to the illicit financial flows that you also referred to.
Thank you, Belinda. Maybe let me start by responding to that question that you had posed, after which Carlos jumped in. Yeah, so I agree that indeed it's very idealistic to expect these companies to plow back. And that's why, for me, that idea of the community ownership schemes was actually helpful, because I think it was something that was legislated for. From my experience, we've seen that as long as anything is voluntary, then the chances of companies complying with it are very limited. And I think that's why he has pointed out that, I mean, even in Peru itself, I mean, despite this being attempted, it has not worked, and more so here because of those factors that I've indicated: the lack of transparency, accountability, participation, and all those. So that's why some of us celebrated when the issue of community ownership schemes was legislated, because this was now compelling companies. Yeah, there may be debates in terms of how those 10 millions that were allocated were used, the abuse and all those other things, fair and fine. But in terms of the principle itself, I think for us, it was a very good principle. Maybe what should have been strengthened is basically the way how it is administered and all those other things. And I think those were also tipping problems that were there. So I agree that leaving it to the companies, I think this will cause problem. This has been there, what you call corporate social responsibility. I mean, people are not guided by that, because it depends on who wants to do it and when they want to do it. So if there's something that is obligated, then people are forced to comply with it. Yeah, so I agree with him, to be honest, in terms of his assessment. Then, of course, the question that were asked in terms of value addition and beneficiation, yes, I think these have helped in terms of economic development. I mean, we export our minerals as raw materials, and they are processed somewhere. And during that process of processing, the value addition and beneficiation, that also creates a lot of other opportunities in terms of job opportunities. And we are losing that out. So basically, by exporting our mineral resources in their raw form, we are basically exporting opportunities and jobs. And this is where we have missed it. And when you look at the African mining vision, it talks about this need for value addition clusters that will help in terms of making sure that we create more opportunities, including the youth. So by doing value addition and beneficiation, then it becomes even more inclusive. I think this is what we wanted to achieve. How does the mining sector become more inclusive? This could be one of the ways, because during that process, opportunities are created, job opportunities are also created, and the youth and women can also participate. But at the moment, we are basically exporting everything, and that is a problem. And because that's how we are losing out. So for me, I would say value addition is very critical. In terms of the illicit financial flows, I think it starts with the laws themselves. That's where, for me, that's why I have problems with this delay in terms of finalizing the Mines and Minerals Amendment Bill. And as I've already indicated, that delay is not by coincidence. There are people, because the legislation at the moment is very weak. Yeah. And people see that as an opportunity. So why change it? Because there are people that are benefiting. So if we sort out the legislation, I think it also be able to help to address some of the challenges that are associated with the illicit financial flows. Okay. Thank you, Belinda.
Thank you so much. I will just raise quickly an issue. So Rumbitai Wandira has said, please highlight the issue of command input distribution. We're wanting to work with the government in growing food for the country, but we have some agronomists who want to be paid in order to release the inputs, and this has a massive drawback, which I don't think will lead us to Vision 2030. If the Minister of Agriculture could follow up on how fast distribution is being done, for example, in Mangura town, you may realize the farmers are not receiving inputs on time to meet up with the rains, which will be a loss for the country. So I think therein lies just an explanation of how corruption is kind of affecting the growth and the development of the agricultural sector. I'm going to call upon Dr. Philian Zamchia. I know you've got your hand up. I've given you co-hosting rights. So if you could unmute your mic and make your contribution, and then I'll move on to our last set of comments and questions.
Thanks, Belinda. I really think that this is a very, refreshing seminar or a workshop, quite informative. I just thought that maybe we didn't touch much on the politics, the politicization of the agricultural industry as well as the mining sector. I think it's one big elephant in the room that really needs to be dissected if ever Vision 2030 is going to be achieved or not. I see that lots of speakers have been sketching around that. That's my main comment. Then the second one is just about the poll itself, Belinda. It seems that Civio is a well-respected think tank, but when you see the sectors that you assume are represented, I don't see universities there or think tanks, so it becomes difficult to locate myself. Thanks, Belinda.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much for that contribution. Do you want to, before you go, do you want to unpack very quickly what you mean by politicization? So there's some people who may or may not understand what you're saying. So maybe just to frame for them in a few sentences what you mean by that. I have an understanding, but for the benefit of everyone else.
Okay, I didn't expect that you would put me on the spotlight, but I'll go ahead. Here I'm talking about the use of state patronage in terms of gaining access to resources. So both the agricultural farming inputs, and even if you look at the mining claims, there is some kind of systemic partisan distribution of these products. And let me say, to an extent that even if you read yesterday's Herald, which is a state paper, it was actually complaining about the distribution of farming inputs under Pfumvudza that ZANU-PF, the ruling party, is actually, some local officials, they're actually distributing this based on partisan lines. So I think if you are having a 2030 vision, it should be a national vision that goes beyond political parties, that goes beyond the current generations. So I think there's actually need to deal with this ill that is patronage. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that contribution, and thank you for allowing me to put you on the spot. I know a couple of people have highlighted how I usually just do that. But look, this is a dialogue, this is a discussion. And as much as possible, we're creating this platform to give citizens a voice. So I know you were on the spot, but thank you for adding your voice to the discussion. I'll just read quickly some comments that have come from Tafa Mutika, who says how the private sector participates in agriculture, and they've highlighted the Pfumvudza model. Is that open to private players? And then on the issue of the offer letter, are they bankable now? I think this would be for Dr. Hungwe. What are authorities doing when seed companies are distorting the market again? That would be for Dr. Hungwe. And then, a comment was environment obviously is key to success. Are miners not respecting environmental law? That would be for Mutuso. So I will as Mutuso and Dr. Hungwe are just coming up to answer those questions, I think those would be the last contributions I'll take. I have asked Ndakaripa, I noticed you had your hand up. I've given you co-hosting rights. Please, can you unmute your mic and just very quickly make your contribution, and then we will take a last word from Mutuso and Dr. Hungwe, and then the rest of our speakers, and we'll close. So Ngoni, please go for it.
All right, thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. I'm very sorry to mention this, but it feels like this dialogue is a dialogue, of course, but only for a few people, and everyone else is a spectator. And I find that to be a lot problematic, despite the fact that the dialogues are themselves very good and well structured. But one thing that I wanted to put forward is the challenge that we actually have in regards to talking about the upper and mid-income economy by 2030. And is the challenge that is to do with how we are, for the most part, inclined to talk more about everything in terms of numbers. We talk about a 20 billion mining economy by 2023. Some time ago, Dr. Masuka, the Minister of Agriculture, was talking about an 8.2 billion agricultural economy by 2025. But no one is talking about indices where people are at the center of things. And I think this is an angle where think tanks such as yours, the Civil Institute, and also the think tank that I represent myself, also need to really talk about and drive the conversation in that direction, where people are the main indice, not so much the numbers in terms of whatever it is that can be produced. We can produce a lot of billions, but if the billions if they are so in a few hands, then that's a problem in its own right. And that is basically where we are headed right now. And I think that needs to change. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Ngoni. And also just to highlight, we've tried as much as possible to get people to participate. But obviously, as I'm sure just working online, not everybody would have their settings in order as they join. So that's the only reason why we've kind of tried to limit how and the permissions, but of course you're free to send a chat, and just as you have done, raise your hand and you can make a contribution. So I'm going to invite our panelists to make closing remarks. I'll start with Dr. Hungwe and Mutuso. Maybe if you can close by answering the two questions that came up, and then I will go quickly to Tawanda and to Carlos.
So can I start? Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for the comments that have come through. I'll just quickly go through the comments where to do with offer letters, whether they are bankable. I think that's something the Ministry of Agriculture, Lands, the multiple names, water, whatever, and rural resettlement have been looking at. I think one of the issues is to come up with much more long-term leases. And the reason why not maybe 5-6 months ago, the establishment of the land bank, which would be under Agricultural Finance Corporation, is one of the answers, because to be frank with you, most of the financial institutions, the private players, have been really providing short-term support. We all know if you're involved in livestock, you need medium to long-term support. So those are the reasons why the land bank would be able to do that, to offer and also to provide more bankable proposals, knowing that they are the ones who would be custodians of the leases or the long-term offer letters or whatever we'd call them. In many countries, I mean, this is nothing new. In many countries, even in our region, people are actually using leases to get financing in Mozambique, in Zambia, in many other countries. So it's nothing new. People are used to title deeds, I know, but you can still do that as long as there's a land bank that becomes kind of the custodian of that title deed or that lease. Then what are authorities doing when city companies are raising thing? I think in the long run, we need much stronger farmers associations. Farmers should be able to import cheaper fertilizer in a way, will be crowding out the private sector in this country. But that's one lesson, so that the private sector knows that it cannot milk farmers forever. So we can actually come up with a block to import cheaper fertilizers, cheaper inputs, to ensure that farming becomes a cheaper venture to go into. So that, I mean, there's no way in a world where fertilizer was $25 last year, US dollars, and this year it becomes $44. There is no economy that can support that. So if private sector players are willing to do that, I think farmer organizations need to come together to form a block to do that and import cheaper fertilizers. And then the paying of extensionists they said paying of extensionists to get access to the presidential and Fumvuza, that's extortion. That's actually punishable by law. Just report and make sure you document when they're doing that, so that such elements in society are removed, so that that doesn't happen. That's just corruption. Then the issue to do with, what other issue? Okay, so for me to say, what does it take to move our agriculture so that it's in line with our vision 2030, to reach the upper middle income status? Some of the issues have been already discussed. One of them was the Land and Agricultural Bank, Development Bank. It must be a developmental bank, because if it's going to be a commercial bank, we have just gone back to where we were. Maintain the multi-form tenure system. We have multi-forms of tenure system. They're all good. A country needs all of them to be able to function. You don't necessarily need one over another. The land governance and administration system, which has been talked about by Carlos, by Mutuso, all those need to be done and in place, including the land information system. And the valuation and compensation framework needs to be finalized. We cannot keep talking about that. And then the spatial planning and devolution. The devolution agenda actually is important in terms of how do we build smarter cities, smarter rural areas? How do we learn from China, where rural areas, growth points, which we call growth points, were able to develop country, develop the country, not necessarily the big industries that we're looking at. So it's almost like, how do we transform ourselves? How do we ensure that we have, cheaper capital to ensure that there's inputs that are available? So there's a whole lot. To discuss agriculture alone, 2 hours is not enough. Just like mining, it's not enough.
Yes.
So how do we value add in agriculture? How do we value add in minerals? How do we ensure that we're not just selling raw commodities? Zimbabwe used to be one of the key countries in terms of floriculture. So my call to people who are interested in agriculture, the young people, is there are lots of opportunities in other crops other than maize, wheat, the traditional crops. Go into coffee. Our coffee plant is sitting, waiting for investments. Macadamia, garlic, ginger, passion fruit, floriculture. You don't necessarily have to do avocados. In Kenya, people are now harvesting avocados that way.
You're going to have to cut you off.
Yeah. Okay. And beyond that, tobacco and cotton. How do you do cotton to the level we were before in Zimbabwe, where our cotton was #1? Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. So Tawanda, 1 minute, 30 seconds, actually. Please give me your closing remarks.
Thanks, Belinda, and thanks to this august panel. I think my encouragement is we are definitely well on our way to setting the base to achieve our 2030 and targets for beyond. We have all the ingredients we need. We have the land, we have the water, we have access to the markets. So for everybody trying to get into agriculture, trying to get more specifically into the horticultural space, the opportunities are bound. And I agree with Dr. Hungwe, what she's talking about, the diversity around garlic, ginger, passion fruit, as we say. We even have custard, apples, things like Madorofio. If I'm being very honest, I have come across markets and orders for those, and the opportunities are vast. Mixed agriculture is probably something to do which spreads your risk. You can have US dollar revenues along with Zim dollar revenues and managing the seasonal side of things are things that I would put into the play. And for our authorities listening on this platform, our appeal is for government to continually improve, give us more incentives, keep blowing the wind in our sails for us to push forward some of the ambitions that I think we have as Zimbabweans is to really, really create capital with long-term assets, which we are ready and happy to do. But otherwise, thank you so much for those who have taken time to listen.
Thank you. Carlos, if you can do 30 seconds, I will let you go. If you can't, it's fine.
So I will just say that, yes, achieving growth is difficult, but achieving inclusive growth is even more of a tough challenge. Yeah. And following yesterday, we launched the Prosperity Index 2021, and Stephen, who's normally with you, was explaining this, and just to say that obviously an inclusive economy requires an inclusive society, and these are the pillars of rule of law and political accountability that generally help you to achieve that inclusive economy. So, good luck in the journey.
Thank you so much, Mutuso.
Thank you. I think there are a number of questions that were directed to me. The one related to environmental degradation, which is a problem and is caused by both large-scale miners and artisanal miners. And when it comes to artisanal miners, it's even more problematic because what they are doing is basically illegal. So how do you even begin to say comply with the law, yet artisanal mining as it stands at the moment is illegal in terms of the Mines and Minerals Act? So that's the starting problem. So they have no incentive whatsoever to rehabilitate because their activities are in any way illegal, but this is a very significant activity that is there. So I think we have some serious problem there that needs to be really looked into. Of course, large-scale miners as well are also involved in the violation of the Environmental Management Act, and that's to a large extent due to weak fines and also enforcement and monitoring by the authorities. Then just to comment briefly on Dr. Zamchia, yes, he is right that the mining sector and patronage, I think, beginning from the colonial era, the mining sector has always been linked to the state. I gave examples of the RAD concession, then even after that, even after independence. So that's why, to a large extent, we are seeing that reluctant to finalize acts like the Mines and Minerals Amendment Bill, the development policy, because to a large extent, it may end up affecting this patronage that is there. So yeah, you are very right, but the mining sector itself has always been politicized, as I said, beginning from the colonial era, the RAD concession, the Sisu John roads and all those other things. So it's a bigger problem that is there. And I agree that.
Sure, thank you so much. So I think we can close it here. I want to say thank you so much to everybody who has
that's African Realization of Vision 2030. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mutuso. I will end it here. I think we've gone way over our time, over by 20 minutes. Just to say thank you so much to everybody who has attended our dialogue. It's been, this obviously is dialogue 5. It's been very enlightening. So this and all the other ones that we have done, just framing what development should look like, especially with regards to agriculture and mining, is what we were discussing today. So we will end it here. My apology once again for going over the time. We are going to meet again for the last time, unfortunately, in 2021. As we're discussing Vision 2030, we are going to be discussing peace, justice, and strong institutions. That's going to be on the 1st of December, Wednesday, the 1st of December at 10 a.m., from 10 a.m. until 12. Hoping I will be a facilitator again, but if not, someone else more capable will be able to do that. But thank you so much for joining me. Thank you to the panelists who attended today. Thank you for making your sound contributions. We truly appreciate it. Of course, you can catch us on Facebook, and the recording of this is available on Facebook. And I want to thank also our broadcast partners, Heart and Soul TV. Despite the challenges, you did make it happen. So thank you very much, and have a good day to everybody.
Bye.